people, we, consumers, don't really read anymore.
No.
We buy based on what we see. You remember things in visuals. You're going to remember your trip here in Boston visually, not based on your itinerary, right? It's just, we are a visual species. 93% of all e-commerce purchases are decided by the product images. The average person reads fewer than 12 words on a shopping trip, right? So just process that. And we've all done it. Ooh, that looks good. I like that. I'll buy it.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Ecommert Podcast. After a quick break, we're back in Boston downtown and we're at the headquarters of Vizit with the founder and CEO, Jehan Hamedi. Jihan, thanks for having us today.
Mert, thanks for being here. Sunny day in Boston, love it.
Sunny day in Boston, almost summertime, and it's always a pleasure to be in Boston. I wish we were in Charles on a couple of rowers and enjoy some beer, but we need to do business first. Today, we're going to be talking about the digital shelf, digital content, what's growing in the CPG ecosystem, and how Vizit is changing the technology layer of the digital shelf for the CPGs and the consumers. But before we get into all the nitty-gritty and juicy parts, I want you to walk us through your career journey, how it all started, what you ran into in the journey, and what you see on the horizon for you and the Vizit team.
Sure, absolutely. So just rewinding all the way back, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Both of my parents are tech entrepreneurs. My grandfather was an entrepreneur and ran a grocery store. And I always wanted to start something, but I really didn't know what for a really long time. I grew up in Wisconsin, but as we were saying, proud terrier, moved out here to Boston for school.
Terriers.
And I found a really kind of fascinating opportunity that kind of connected AI with consumer behavior and content. And so I studied consumer behavior in college. And after I kind of graduated, I started my career actually working in AI. So really about the last 15 years, I've been in the AI industry, building and leading teams that design systems that can analyze content predictively. First did that for a company that had some really cool technology in the text analytics space. So trying to understand what words to use to shape consumer perceptions was something so cool, because in college, you read this book about designing a survey, and then you realize that machines can do this at a massive amount of scale and learn from billions of consumer interactions. And so then, I just kind of had an aha moment that's just kind of funny to say out loud. Again, many of our customers were spending millions of dollars on text and trying to figure out what words to use, right? It underpins Google's entire economy. It's a big one.
Spoiler alert.
That's right. Yeah, just so you know. But I realized, people, we, consumers, don't really read anymore.
No.
We buy based on what we see. You remember things in visuals. You're going to remember your trip here in Boston visually, not based on your itinerary, right? It's just, we are a visual species. And so what I realized was that there was an enormous opportunity to understand kind of visual content and the power that it has at driving conversion. So that led us down this incredible path of inventing a really powerful technology that we call audience lenses that enable our customers to predictively assess the effectiveness of image-based content through the eyes of any consumer anywhere in the world. And that invention really led us to pioneer this field of visual intelligence.
You touched upon a really interesting point, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was wondering in the back of my head, which is tougher, cracking the consumer behavior or cracking the code and technology? But you answered it yourself. We don't have time to analyze, dissect, and absorb anymore. We just want the experience and go on with it as a consumer. Yeah. So I think cracking consumer behavior nowadays is much more easier and faster with the data, as long as you can get your hands on the data.
Exactly, and then you have to weaponize it, right? It's going to sound kind of scary to say, but the fate of your business is decided in 13 milliseconds.
Right.
That is the attention span that people have now.
Correct.
It is scroll, see, click, and that kind of consumer behavior just leads us to this world where decisions are happening subconsciously, not consciously. You see something, you like it, you don't. And so when you can capture that data, but then harness it, it provides not only a new competitive advantage, but a really powerful way to get close, ironically, using AI to get closer to your consumers than ever before. Right?
Now let's get into the trenches right away.
Sure.
Because for people with scientific background, it may sound easier than it's really what it is on the field or battleground. But content production is not as easy. I mean, there are agencies, there are content teams, media teams, yes. But please explain a little bit how the technology solutions like Vizit or audience lenses or different capabilities powered by data can help CPGs. Because even today, 2025, 3 years after COVID, we all know, and as an e-commerce, we also know firsthand from our engagements with the CPG global enterprises, content production is still a struggle. And it's not the problem of generating the quantity, but making quality meaningful instances for the consumer. So can you please explain us, where do you see the biggest value proposition and opportunity for content production at CPG enterprise level from your engagements and the technology you're offering?
Sure. So you hit on a really interesting point that quantity isn't a problem anymore.
Right.
And that's such an important thing to consider, because when you think about what ChatGPT and the other AI companies have done, is they've now made it possible for any company, any upstart, to basically have a creative agency on demand. The result of that is a lot more content produced, a lot more noise. And so to the CPGs that are listening, the risk of becoming invisible is now non-zero because of the fact that there is so much content coming out. So the critical question that you have to answer is this the right content? Is this content good? And so where Vizit fits into the content production work stream and into the content lifecycle is in a few important areas. So when you if you begin the content process, you have a research question, you have a brief. There's a goal that you want to achieve, right? It's holiday coming up and you want to refresh your product page content. So what typically happens in a pre-Vizit world is you would brief your design team or your design agency, and they would go create a bunch of concepts. They would then bring those concepts, you're smiling, and you're
sounds like 60s already.
That's right. Highest paid person in the room, the hippos, I like that one. And you kind of go down this path of more subjective iteration. Vizit upends that. And we basically first give our customers cheat codes that help them understand, right now on the digital shelf in your category, here's what content is converting the best. And here's what content is converting the worst. Not just from your own, but your competitive set. That gives you really good inspiration.
Category-wide.
To help you understand, what does good look like? That then enables our customers to create playbooks and guides that then say, okay, when this is the audience that we're trying to attract in this particular market, in this particular category for this brand, here are some of the do's and don'ts based on what is proven to be effective. And then you get into the production itself. So again, what AI systems, what incredible designers are able to do is create tons of variants, right? You could photograph a cheeseburger or a can of tuna fish in 1,000 different ways, 1 trillion different ways.
We can make tuna even swim.
That's right. So when you have all of those different options, what Vizit then provides is predictive scoring in the content development process. So that we call it Vizit verified content. You can verify the effectiveness of your content before putting it into syndication.
And before even putting it into DAM.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Before even in the approval stage. So it gives you A/B testing before running the content.
That's exactly right. And so what our customers now are able to do when they do that is they can systematically make more effective content. And when they benchmark against their competitors, they can also ensure that every piece of content that they're putting out is more likely to convert their shoppers than everything their competitors have. So that's where we start seeing Vizit get operationalized in the production process. But it doesn't stop there, because as you said, once content gets approved, it's in the DAM, it's in the PIM, it's syndicated. Now the digital shelf is being reported on in your DSA, like Profitero, Nielsen, IQ. There's so many awesome solutions there. But now, like, your content needs to be scored and evaluated just like your share of search, right? So, like, if imagine you launch your content and it's a 70 today, but all of your competitors next month update their content and theirs are all 90s, like, you better be really cheap. Otherwise, you're going to lose. You got to drop your price, or you're going to lose a ton of conversion, or you're not going to like how much you have to spend on retail media. So, what I find is that monitoring the effectiveness of your content and your image creates a really powerful unlock, because it'll help you understand, if you're losing share, you're losing points. Is that because
what is the driver?
Exactly, what's driving it?
And there's not always one driver.
No,
you need to be granular, and you need to be able to list and measure the weight or impact of multiple drivers, etc.
Exactly. I'll give you an even crazier example. So one of our most innovative customers is Mars. They're an incredible partner. I love working with Mars. And one of the things that they realized is that, when you kind of think about how a brand manager might typically approach a brand refresh, is they might look at their sales chart and say, well, we're not trending where we need to be. Like, let's change the packaging, and like, we've all heard that, right? Like, I've been in the room, it's like, are you sure? And obviously it's an extremely expensive endeavor. It takes a ton of time, ton of people involved. But again, your packaging is an image. And so when you think about the hero image of your product on an e-commerce page, what Vizit can do is analyze how attractive, how effective that is at driving conversion relative to all the other packs. So what Mars and others will do is they'll say, like, okay, like, we know that we're in the 90th percentile for this particular product. I'm not going to touch that packaging ever. So if something is actually kind of impacting our performance, we know it's not that, or we know it's not the product content, the carousel content, or we know it's not the reviews. And as you said, you can start to get very surgical with how you think about optimizing on a SKU level.
Just to give some context to the audience and listeners who might not have technical first-hand knowledge, any retailer in the world, choose Target, choose Carrefour, choose Rave, choose Shopee or Lazada, they have minimum 40, 50 different attributes on any given product detail page, right? Some up to 70. But we don't get to talk to a consumer behavior specialist and data tech founder every day. So I want to ask you the reason why visuals are so important on the product detail page. I mean, I have some learning and experience, but I want to hear the scientific reasoning from you. Why consumers weigh and prioritize product visuals over many other attributes on a detail page, like 50, 60 attributes any given time?
I want you
How human brain work before we go to the credit card and approve.
Yeah, sure. So the human brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text, right? We see faster than we can read. No. And 80% of what we remember is visual. And when you actually look at the PDP itself, in fact, 93% of all e-commerce purchases are decided by the product images. And I'll tell you why. So think about, Mert, everything that you've ever purchased over your entire life. The awesome shirt, the shoes you're wearing, your house, the Airbnb you stayed at, your car, the coffee machine sitting at your house. What's the one thing that all of those purchases have in common? They appealed to you.
Yes.
You saw something, it sparked something, and you wanted it. That's how the consumer thinks. That's how we buy. So when you think about the first moment of truth or the last moment of truth, it actually starts and stops with images, because we look at products before we buy them online. Even in the age of AI search, right, where the AI bots are going to go find and kind of identify the most relevant products to us, you're still going to have that confirmatory step of like, yes, that does look good to me. And so when you think about that, images are actually your online sales team. And you should really think about them that way. And so, to everybody in the room, I mean, if you ever managed a sales team, like, how could you possibly think about doing that without having any metrics? You'd be nuts, right? Like, how would you know which ones are really working hard and performing that you're going to reward? And how would you know which ones need to be, enhanced?
I'm risking revealing my age here, but there's a term for this old school methodology. They used to call it spray and pray.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's even worse. It's like blindfold.
You're right.
Right? Like, I remember it was probably 10 years ago, I had a conversation with a very large dish soap brand that I think we've all used. And I'd asked the brand manager, like, what's the best image of brand X? It's like, I don't know. So what do you mean you don't know? Like, you're like, and it's not because that person was doing anything wrong. The technology wasn't there.
Wasn't available.
The data wasn't available. And it just
A/B
kind of
testing wasn't even a thing up until 15, 16 years ago.
No, and all an A/B test tells you, if you and I are running from a bear, I'm probably getting eaten by the bear. It's not telling us. It's not telling you how good that runner actually is.
That's true.
And it's not telling you how good that is versus the competitor set that you're trying to steal eyes and buys from. So it becomes this. It kind of creates this really interesting moment for us as an industry that, like, commerce as a whole has a $1 trillion blind spot. And it's that nobody knows how effective or how attractive they are presenting their products to the people they're trying to sell to, which sounds nuts. But really, it's because the technology wasn't available. And what we had found, like, I never set out to start an AI company. I was interested in technology. I'm an inventor. But it turns out that AI is the perfect solution to this problem.
At scale and at speed.
Exactly.
Now you're opening another interesting door for me, and I'm going to go through it. Because last 3-4 years, we were all caught up with the retail media frenzy, right?
Yeah.
Retail media driving traffic, retail media growth, all the retail media platform proliferation, etc. But driving traffic organically or with paid media is one thing. And when the traffic arrives at the destination, converting in is another.
Yeah.
And that brings the question of content effectiveness, which we're talking about. So, do you agree my observation that more and more CPG brands are kind of reached the plateau of retail media FOMO? They've figured out how to manage the retail media bandwagon acceleration. And now they're focusing more and more content effectiveness because they understood that there's a synergy between the content conversion and the traffic driven by the retail media. Can you walk us through your observations or what you've been hearing from your clients about the effect or efforts going towards content effectiveness, how they're improving their content to improve the conversion, because all this retail media growth and funding should come with an ROI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best analogy that I heard for this was from one of our partners, Todd Hasenfeld at Colgate. Todd. World-class human, awesome guy. And he and the team are incredibly innovative. And one of the things that Todd shared at a recent event that really just stuck with me is this analogy of a block party. So imagine you're hosting a block party and you are inviting all of your friends. You're inviting the most important people to you in your circle to this party. And you say, I'm going to have lobster and we're going to have, steak, and it's just going to be this ornate room. And now imagine, everybody shows up and you've got like kind of chicken nuggets on the floor and it kind of stinks and smells kind of funny. What are you going to do? You're going to walk right out. And so that's sort of this kind of interesting thing that's happening with retail media is the retail media teams and the brands are so focused on driving all of the traffic, but they aren't necessarily realizing that all of those eyes are then going to come and look at something.
Right.
And that content, whether it's effective or not, has a direct impact on your retail media ROI. Yeah. And it actually gets worse. So imagine you're doing sponsored search and they're paying for that click, right? So your hero image, it looks like a great can of tuna fish or a great, whatever it is. Some fantastic looking dog food. And you click on that image, you go to the PDP, and then you don't like what you see. What does the shopper do? They click back and click on somebody else's. So it's a scary thing to think about, but your retail media spend is directly feeding leads to your competitors if your product page content isn't effective. So that's just another lens to consider it under, because I find that what our customers will now do, which is really, really clever, is before they, and most sponsored search is always on, but what our customers will do is they'll kind of look at their content, they'll visit their product pages before they pull the trigger on that retail media spend to make sure like, okay, am I optimized? Great, now I'm gonna hit go. And then they'll routinely check on that content health because they'll want to know like, is this content getting stale? Am I getting outperformed? So in those ways, you have to, you have to kind of abandon this idea of set it and forget it. Content is a revenue driving asset, and you need to treat it like such, like your supply chain or your media buying or your IP or your product development. It is something that needs to be constantly fed and optimized and tweaked because that's what the consumer expects, but it's also what is actually driving the sales.
Now you read my mind. So I'm curious whether you have some sixth sense skills or some funny AI going on. I don't know, body language reading. But now you touch upon another very big challenge. Because it's second nature to us and many people in the CPG measuring the sales impact, measuring the ROI of any paid investment we do. But cross-functional teams are involved in this, to your point. So there's your content team, there's your media team, there's your agency partner, and of course, marketing team and sales team, let alone demand planners and supply chains, because they're also impacted with fulfillment and refill rate, etc. So how do you tackle those challenges? I'm not expecting as one solution, one tech product to tackle all this, but how Vizit is integrated into automation workflows, how Vizit is integrated into reporting and measurement solutions to answer the same question for cross-functional teams, multiple teams at once.
Yeah, it's as you said, it is for everybody that's worked in or supported CPG. It's complex, right? Yes. Like there's a lot of moving parts. One of the things that absolutely surprised me since founding Vizit is we'll have calls with customers or with prospects, and when you invite 10, 20, 30 people on those calls, sometimes they hadn't met each other before.
No.
This is one of the first times that they've come together around this idea of visual intelligence, which is awesome. But it also tells you that there are real silos. And so I have found that one of the most successful ways to break down a silo is to start with a couple of key things. First is your goal. Mm-hmm. Like, it just sounds really simple, but like, what is it that we are trying to achieve as a business this year? We wanted to grow our online sales by X%, for example. Okay, so where then Vizit can come in and kind of bring some of the right stakeholders to the table is to help understand where to start. Where do we prioritize our energy around content?
To meet that one particular goal.
To meet that goal.
Alongside many.
Exactly, because I feel like a lot of times when CPGs or retailers work with tech partners, whether early stage or late stage, they have a need or a use case, but it tends to be worked on over here rather than as part of like an engine that is going to drive growth or drive an outcome that you are intending to do. So with Vizit, one of the things that we'll first do is we'll kind of analyze our customers' catalog and we'll help them identify which products have kind of the greatest opportunity for visual enhancement and conversion impact, conversion lift. And so then what happens, and I think everybody in an organization feels this, is as soon as you activate a new piece of technology and you get a sales lift, the light bulbs go off. The room gets bigger.
Right.
The smiles are, proliferating. People then realize like, I just unlocked a new capability that is driving a measurable business benefit. And when you can get to that point, then other stakeholders kind of come to the table and say, okay, that's tied to some of my OKRs, that's tied to some of these goals that we have. So how do we now kind of work to not just operationalize this in the second phase, but scale it? And I think the key for Vizit has been with our customers is we create for our customers a shared language that they haven't had before around content effectiveness.
Impacting multiple silos, multiple teams at once.
Exactly, yep. And it comes down to the Vizit score. Because now the Vizit score is an objective way of understanding how likely your content is to convert your target customers. It's something we'll talk about a little later that is kind of converted into a KPI. And it's something that now creates sort of a baseline understanding of what good looks like in our organization and what our consumers expect to see from us. And that kind of eliminates, as you could imagine, so much, stargazing or, kind of endless iteration cycles, guessing, and frankly, like waste.
But here's a funny thing. I presume as a content-based solution or content optimizing and business impact solution, most of the budgeting, most of the decision-making comes from the media team or content team. Is it a right assumption?
Not always.
Okay, that's great. If it's not the right assumption, even better. Where the biggest or most common buy-in comes from? Because as you said, and I can testify for this, I use Vizit in the previous organization I worked for. It impacts multiple teams, commerce included and marketing included, even though it impacts my way differently. But buy-in doesn't have to come from one particular team. So where do you get the buy-in most of the time? Is it distributed, or do you see a trend growing that sales teams are started paying more attention to content-driven solutions because now they started seeing the results on their sales performance? Do you see this kind of shift or impact distribution in terms of buy-in in the cross-functional nature of our e-commerce teams?
Yeah, I mean, I find that, analyzing content predictively with AI is a new concept. So a lot of times, Vizit is really fortunate to work with some extremely innovative teams and teams that are thinking about, doing things differently, that want to win, they're wired differently. I think the buy-in ultimately comes from the P&L owners. So those are the folks that, have growth goals, they have efficiency goals, they have, share goals. And those teams, at the brand level, at the market level, those are the ones that are kind of looking at how can I use content as a strategic growth driver for the business, and then can bring together, each, as you said, the CX team supporting this customer, Amazon or Walmart, the trade teams, all the retail media teams, what have you. And so I find that, when you have an organization that has so many different potential applications for visuals, like, visuals pervade most teams at a CPG when you really think about it. It's important to sort of start with like what our goal is. And our goal as an organization is to create the best possible shopper experiences for our consumers that we can at scale. We want to outshine our competitors. We want to have, we want to show our retail partners that we are investing in high quality content on their sites, and they're not just getting the same thing that everybody else is getting.
Because at the end of the day, it's consumers' experience on the retailer's site. So retailers benefit from it too, even though they don't move their finger.
Yeah, our customers will take their content that has been analyzed with Vizit, they'll show it to their retail partners and say, look, we are creating and investing in an optimized experience for you, because we know this is what your shoppers want to see, and we want to be best in class. And so when you just kind of think about how that can change a JBP or just any kind of, it changes the dynamic.